Dr. K, my kids are going back to school this week and I have been feeling so anxious. I have such dread. It feels like the back to school period is a real trigger for my PTSD, which is a little bit strange to me because my trauma had nothing to do with school. So it's not like something really bad happened to me in a school. So I'm not sure why the back to school period is so triggering, but every year I get this real anxiety and these real panic attacks the entire, like the 2 weeks before school and the whole first month of school. I'm not sure why that happens. Can you help me understand it? Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, YouTube's post-traumatic parenting expert. If you're a post-traumatic parent and you don't want your damage to damage your kids, if this topic, if back to school period is triggering for you as well and you're not quite sure why, please click subscribe below so you never miss another episode, because this is the kind of topic we talk about here. So first of all, I want to explain something about PTSD and trauma and how it affects us in our parenting. So a lot of times, the back to school period, or really anything that triggers our trauma response, may not have a linear connection to what traumatized us. Meaning, it sort of makes sense that somebody who was in a fire might be afraid of fire. It makes sense that someone who was mauled by a dog might be afraid of dogs, right? So if you were mauled by a dog, why are you afraid of the back to school period, right? There doesn't seem to be that linear connection between the trauma and the fear. But here's the thing. Underneath a trauma is the implications of that experience, right? So if your traumatic experience made you feel like the world was out of control, it was too scary, and whatever happened to you was too much, too fast, too overwhelming, out of control. You felt alone and isolated. There were no adults to help you cope. There were no friends to help you cope. It was too big for your brain. That's what trauma is. So the back to school period, that sense of, I can't control this, I don't know what it's gonna be like when my kids are in school, maybe I'm worried for my kids because, like, what if they don't have a good teacher? What if there's a bully? What if the school bus gets into an accident? It's out of my control. I can't protect them. I can't make sure this goes well for them. So that might have nothing to do with the actual traumatic event, but it does have something to do with the meaning you made of that traumatic event. So if when you were traumatized, you thought, I will never be in a situation that I cannot control again. And that trauma app in your brain said, if something feels threatening, control it. And that was that if-then rule that your trauma app in your brain created, then my kids going to school is completely out of my control. I can possibly choose the school depending where I live, but that's not it. I can choose. Can't necessarily choose which teacher her class is going to be assigned. Can't choose whether or not the bus driver is going to have an aneurysm on his way to school while he's driving. Can't choose whether or not there's going to be a bully that decides my kid's the perfect target. I can control how I respond to those things, but I can't control it. Can't control whether or not my kid does well in school, can't control whether or not my kid, finds reading easy, enjoyable, and fun, or whether my kid finds math really difficult. I can't control any of those things, right? So that out of control sensation can feel really triggering to a post-traumatic parent. Now, there are times that school was an aspect of the trauma. Maybe the school itself wasn't traumatic, but you were bullied. Maybe having to go to school while holding the invisible backpack of your trauma felt really, really intolerable. So like everybody else is coming to school having eaten regular breakfast with two smiling parents who like waved them off, and the grass is green and the school buses are yellow and the sky is blue and the roses are red, and everything is just so predictable, and your life looks nothing like that. And after a while, that kind of thing just feels traumatic, like when you realize the gaps between yourself and the other student. It's sort of, I call this sort of like naming the water for kids, where a kid will sometimes say to me, a dramatic realization that they have that is obvious to everybody else. And then you start realizing what's going on in that child's life. Like when a child says, in other families, the parents wash the clothes and then the kids just have their uniform, it's ready for them. Or I remember when I was teaching, one of my first years, I think I was a assistant teacher or a student teacher, and a kid told me that not everybody eats breakfast in school. Some kids have houses where there's food in their house and their parents give them food. And this was like a dramatic realization for this first grader. And your heart could just break, right? So sometimes it's not that school was traumatic. In fact, for this kid, I would argue that school was a safe place. But it's the realization of how different your life is from other people's lives that is traumatic. So in that sense, or just having to go to school while you are holding an invisible backpack full of so much stress and trauma, and some genius standing in the front of the room wants you to memorize the multiplication tables. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to hide from my stepdad when I get home so he doesn't beat me, and you want me to tell you what 7 times 7 is? I don't know, but I can tell you that today is my stepdad's late shift, so I'm going to make sure to get home before he gets home and hide in my room, grab a peanut butter sandwich and hide in my room because he gets drunk after work, right? But 7 times 7, I don't know, right? It's that kind of situation. That's traumatic. Not because school was traumatic. School was okay, but everything that the child is carrying is traumatic. So if that's you, and the after school period feels the back to school period feels super traumatic for you, that might be why. It's also very common if you're sending your kids off to school because you're breaking the cycle, and you're sending your kids off to school well prepared with a healthy breakfast and a parent smiling and waving goodbye to them, and they've done their homework and they have they're dressed for school and they're clean and they look fine, and it's a lot of stuff that you didn't have. Your inner child might feel some jealousy for your real world child, and that can be a trigger too. Right? Because you feel like, how could I be jealous of my own kid? Like, what's wrong with me? But it's not you who's jealous, it's your inner child who's jealous. And what you need to do is you need to show up for your inner child like you do for your real world children. And you need to say to your inner child, yeah, it would have been nice to have that. It's sad that we didn't have that. But as I provide that to our real world child, you can experience what that's like vicariously, and you can start to heal. Right? Inner child, like I'm here with you, I'm the adult. And that really helps with that jealousy and the attendant shame that we feel when we feel jealous of our own kids. I know for myself, the back to school period was always very triggering for me because of the lack of control. Like my children are out of my direct control, and I cannot directly control what's happening to them. The first day I sent my oldest daughter off on the school bus, I had a full-blown panic attack. I was sitting at my kitchen table, her bus had pulled away, and we did the whole, morning thing of like, goodbye, first day of school pictures, and like all the excitement, and like her hair was done and she's ready to go to school, and and I waved goodbye to her as she went on the bus. I went into my house and I was all ready to go in. At that point I was at NYU and I was ready to take the bus into the city, and I froze. I had a complete panic attack, and I went into like what polyvagal theory would call a real like dorsal vagal freeze state. I was completely shut down. I remember sitting there at the kitchen table, and there was a part of my brain thinking, you really need to go to work. Like, you have to leave, like stand up. I could not move because I was listening for the squeal of brakes and for her bus to get into an accident. And then I was panicking that her teacher would be mean. And then I was panicking that, the day would go poorly. And what if she's not okay? And what if I die on my way to work? Like, my brain was just spiraling out of control. And I was so frozen that I actually had to like text the office manager at NYU to say that I was sick and I wasn't going to be coming in because I couldn't move. I actually wasn't even able to text. I had my husband send the text because I couldn't bring my fingers to move over my old-fashioned flip phone in those days and actually text the office manager. That's how frozen I was. Because for post-traumatic parents, having children is an act of courage, right? And that's that whole idea that parenting is about roots and wings, right? And giving our kids roots is one act of courage because we know about loss and we know about trauma. We know everything that can go wrong. So it's really courageous to have kids. And then to give them wings, to let them leave our direct environment and spread their wings and fly out of the nest, that's supreme courage, because you're taking your heart and giving it wings and letting it fly, not being able to directly control or protect or, intervene in their lives. And that's even scarier. And of course, that was a panic attack and I got over it. And, the second day of school went a lot better. But if that kind of thing happens to you, if the back to school period is triggering, sometimes it's triggering simply because trauma likes to keep our brain small. And trauma likes to keep our lives small and our lives predictable. And the new school year is bigger and less predictable because there's a new schedule to get used to. There's a new teacher and the demands that new teacher makes. There's a new environment to get used to. There's a new schedule, a new structure, right? So that's new, and new is stressful. And trauma wants things to be safe and old and predictable, and nothing should ever change. So that trauma app in your brain is like, new is dangerous. If you think of Inside Out, fear says this looks new. You think it's dangerous, right? The idea that when something is new, it's potentially bad. So just that feels very triggering to our trauma. But the more we know about the fact that back to school can trigger us, the more prepared we are to handle it when we have that panicky feeling about back to school. So then we can say to the trauma app, hi trauma app, you're sending me panicky feelings about the back to school period. Thanks for letting me know. You're right, it's gonna be stressful. I can tolerate the stress. It's going to be hard. Here's my plan for handling it. Here's a couple of things I'm going to do. We're going to get through this. I'm the grown-up. I'm in charge. Thanks for the information, but I am removing your permissions from controlling this situation. And then preparing yourself that, the 2 weeks before school, possibly the first month of school, are going to be a little stressful. Your trauma app is going to be shrilling alarms very loudly. And that's okay, and that's normal, and build in more self-care, build in more time to de-stress, for me it's go for a run, more time to do things that make you feel like you. Maybe this is the month to have a lot of dinners in your freezer so that you're not rushing to cook as they're coming home from school and adding to the stress. Maybe this is the time to say peanut butter and jelly on whole wheat bread is perfectly good supper, and I'm not even stressing about anything else. Right, but the idea being that it is stressful, particularly if you're a post-traumatic parent. So give yourself space and grace and understanding to handle it. If you're a post-traumatic parent and you like this video, please tag a friend, save, like, share, send this video to a friend who needs to hear it, because the post-traumatic parenting community grows one post-traumatic parent at a time. If you want to hang out where your fellow post-traumatic parents hang out, check out at Dr. Koslowitz Psychology on Instagram. If you have an anecdote, a tip, a trick for dealing with the triggers that the back to school season brings up in post-traumatic parents, please comment below. Let us know. If you would like a video on a different topic, tell me. I will gladly shoot that. Many of these videos come from questions submitted by people like you. If you want to read my writings on trauma and parenting and how to parent psychodiverse kids, check out my targeted parenting blog on Psychology Today. Check out the Post-Traumatic Parenting podcast, which is available wherever you get your podcasts. That's where I interview experts on the intersection between trauma and parenting. And of course, the Post-Traumatic Parenting book is coming out in 2025 from Broadleaf. Check out my website, Dr. Koslowitz Psychology, where you will find the links for the pre-order and exciting news about pre-launch events. Until next time.